Hi everyone, welcome to another 7-minute software video. Today we're going to talk about drawing in 2D with vector software. We're going to look at broad concepts such as drawing with points and lines, making 2D shapes, using fills, patterns, strokes, curves, and we're going to look at these techniques specifically through the vector software Adobe Illustrator. The goal is not just to understand how to use these techniques in Adobe Illustrator, but also to understand that these are cross-platform vector drawing techniques. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to open up Adobe Illustrator and I'm going to create a new file. Like I mentioned in my previous video, we're going to measure our canvas in page sizes. So I'm just going to create an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And when we talk about drawing in software, it's possible that you can imagine virtually drawing as if you were drawing on a piece of paper. And certainly Illustrator allows you to do that. For example, you can take the paintbrush and you can make a squiggle. And as we mentioned, you can zoom into this squiggle and it will always be smooth, right? That's the benefit of using vector drawing software. But vector drawing software actually comes from a long lineage of very precise drawing tools. And the precision is what makes vector drawing software important. And since this series is geared towards designers and architects, I think we're going to approach drawing from a very precise way. Vector software relies primarily on points and lines for drawing. So we're going to use a couple of tools that most vector software will have, such as the pen tool, the line drawing tool, and the shape drawing tool. So let's start with the pen tool. The pen tool is going to be your bread and butter in a lot of vector drawing operations. With the pen tool, you can just click different points and define a shape. If you come back to the original point where you started with the pen tool, you will close the shape and you'll be able to keep drawing other closed shapes. To draw shapes that are not closed, you can press the escape key to stop clicking points. Notice that the idea here is to just click points and lines are automatically created connecting the points that you have placed on the screen. Notice that the lines that are connecting these points are always straight. I'm going to delete all of this and I'm going to show you how to make even more precise lines. So rather than just freehanding points, what you can do is hold down Shift to draw a perfectly constrained line. And you can also see sometimes that you get a guideline that pops up. This guide helps you draw very precisely. And so I'm holding Shift right now and I'm creating perfect boxes by following the guidelines that are popping up. Now let's move on to drawing shapes. As we saw earlier, Illustrator also allows you to draw shapes pretty easily. I can draw rectangles, I can draw ellipses, I can draw custom polygons. Again, holding Shift to make it more precise, and that's pretty straightforward as well. So at the very least, we now know how to draw straight lines. We can do custom polygons, and we can do precise shapes like ellipses and rectangles. If you want more control over your lines, you can use the pen tool to create what's called Bezier curves. So I'm going to click a start point here with the pen tool, and then I'm going to drag my second point so that I get this little handle. And these little handlebars, notice, allow you to produce curves. Now the longer the handle is, the more curved the arc will be. The pen tool is a little bit tricky sometimes, so you have to really practice to get control over it. But essentially, the idea is that you click and drag handles to create smooth curves. And just like at the beginning, if you click back to the original point, you'll end up closing the shape. Let's do one more test with the pen tool, just to really get a handle of how it works. I can use the Shift key, again, to constrain my line to be perfectly straight. But then I can also constrain the handle to be on that straight line. And that might give me more constrained curves. So now you have a curve that is a little bit more controlled and still curvilinear. Okay, so now let's go back to our 2D shapes. So let's say that we wanted to treat a 2D shape, like an ellipse, almost as a Bezier curve. Now vector software allows you to control the points and lines individually that make up a shape. And so if you go to the direct selection tool, this arrow right here, you get the ability to select individual points and their handles. I can manipulate this ellipse and I can stretch the top of that ellipse and I can get an egg shape, for example. I can also click on the handle and make it a little bit more irregular. And you can do the same thing with any 2D shape. If I take this rectangle, for instance, I turn on the direct selection tool, I can move it, and I can start with a really precise shape and then manipulate it via its points and lines. Another way that we can start to manipulate 2D shapes is by using Boolean operations. So if you have two shapes like this, for instance, and we want to use one of them to subtract from the other, as if this shape that's in front is going to be taken out of the overlapping area of this one, we can use the Pathfinder in Illustrator to perform that operation. The Pathfinder here allows you to either combine shapes, or to subtract shapes, or to get only the intersection between shapes, or the inverse of the intersection. These are going to be really useful for making complex polygonal shapes. So for example, if I want to subtract this area from this shape using this shape, I will select both of these shapes, and making sure that this one was created after I created this one, I can just click this little icon here, the minus front. Let's try that again. I'm going to make a square, and then I'm going to make an ellipse, and I'm going to put this ellipse right at that intersection. And now I've got this L shape, and I can rotate it, and I can keep manipulating it with the direct selection tool if I need to. Make it even more interesting. Now the next thing that you might want to do is add a color or a pattern to your composition. This is really easily done with the swatches panel. Now you have access to the color swatches up here or in the color picker panel over here. You can very easily just find an appropriate color using this color picker. Just select your shape, pick another color, select your shape, pick another color. To turn off the border, you can select a shape and you can either say no stroke up here, or you can select a shape and say the stroke weight is 0. The last thing that might be useful for you would be to give each shape a pattern rather than an individual color. You can apply patterns by going into your pattern swatch window. You go to Window, Swatch Libraries, Patterns. Let's just find a basic pattern here, some dots. Now make sure that you've got the fill activated in the color panel, and then you can just select any shape and you can give it a pattern. So hopefully this has been useful for you. I'll see you next time.